Welcome to New Mexico Restaurants Now, where we get you the inside scoop on the food scene across New Mexico. This episode is brought to you by NMRA's Chef Table sponsors. These businesses provide the most generous level of support to help keep our restaurants protected, informed, and successful. So, I want to have a big thank you to Benny Keith Foods, the Food Industry Self-Insurance Fund, Heartland Payment Systems, Shamrock Food, Cisco New Mexico, and U.S. Foods. We wouldn't be here without you. I'm Carol White, CEO of the New Mexico Restaurant Association, and today our guest is Greg McAllister, the distilling dentist from Algodones Distillery. Greg, it's great to have you here.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so the distilling dentist. My husband earlier today came up with an interesting quote about dentists. He said, if you're not drilling and filling, you're not billing. And so now you're distilling.
Oh, he's muted.
You muted. Somehow you got muted.
Jeez. I said, well, that's true. I said, and I have two kinds of shots that will get you numb. So I joke with my patients about that, and my assistants say, no, he's telling the truth. So
that's fun.
Yeah.
What gave you the interest in distilling?
Well, the family and I, when we travel, we really like to try local foods and drinks around the country and around the world. So I guess I read an article a few years back, and it asked in the headline, it said, are you a locavore? And it said, if not, you should be drinking these. And of course, it was directed towards craft spirits, which in the early teens were becoming a thing around the country. And it actually listed some spirits that came from craft distilleries around the country and from some unusual places like a moonshine distillery in Brooklyn, gin that was made in Philadelphia, rum that came from the Berkshire Mountains of Massachusetts, where I spent part of my childhood. So, typical spirits coming from atypical places. And so I used that article to source those things and try them and compare them to what I knew about, the established brands from the major companies, and really was pleasantly surprised. So as we traveled, and we're trying different regional foods in our travels, we would also try a cocktail or a drink of some kind, including, locally produced beer and wine with our meal, just to really experience what the local people were doing with their ingredients and really came to enjoy it. So that's what got us hooked.
Very good. And I mean, it's one thing to taste it. It's a whole other thing to start making it.
True.
And I can see behind you. Thank you for putting that distiller there.
It's a still. It's a copper still.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a beauty.
Now, is that at your Algodones?
It is. Yeah, I'm actually sitting in our distillery today, so I thought that would make a good prop in the background. So
very nice background, and it's not just a picture, right?
That's right. It's the real thing, and I'll grab my iPad here and just give you a quick shot of the rest of it and some of the work that we're doing in the distillery. We actually have a stainless steel and a copper still that are used for different processes here. So, yeah.
So were you still doing dentistry? Do you have time to do that too?
Well, I am. I'm actually practicing 3 days a week out of the area. I'm a traveling dentist. I go to some underserved community in eastern New Mexico, and I work out there. And I work this job basically the rest of the week, Friday through Monday, until I go back to work in the clinic.
Very interesting. Well, I was on your website earlier today. I have not been out there, but love Algodones, love that area. So we will be out there very soon.
Yeah, love to.
Yeah, and then you also have a tasting room in Ruidoso. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we do. My son's mom has a gift shop down there, and when I was paying a visit, I noticed that they had a bar that they were using as their sales counter, and we got to talking, and they wanted to give us the opportunity to showcase our spirits, and then they also wanted the opportunity to give patrons a chance to sample some local spirits while they shop. So it was kind of a win-win situation.
Nice. And you get a lot of folks from out of state in
Yes.
Ruidoso. So
Oh yeah.
that's a great,
Hmm.
not that you don't in Algodones, but I get it's a little bit more of a drive from the tourist destination, right?
Yeah, it is. Although luckily we're on the main track between Albuquerque and Santa Fe, so we do get a fair amount of tourists coming through that are, making their way to some of our other scenic locations in the state to check out New
Nice.
Mexico.
Nice. So tell us about some of your products.
Well, we established the distillery in 2013, and we went commercial with a distributor in 2015. It takes a while to get licensing and processes down. And really, our first two products were a vodka and a gin. And our focus really has been on trying to be hyper local. We try to source our materials as close to home as we can. In fact, one of the errands I was doing today was picking up labels from our printer in Albuquerque, who, are known for doing a lot of food and drink labeling for companies here. So we wanted to try to support local in every way we could, including sourcing as many of the ingredients that go into our products as we could. So we don't make our base for the vodka here. It is sourced on the commodities market, but we do all the finish work here in-house. We use our local water source. We're on a deep well. We run that through an RO reverse osmosis system. We filter and bottle it here and then hand label everything. I think of the 20,000+ bottles we've ever sold, I've labeled every one. And my back and feet sometimes
Can tell you
tell
that.
me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, interestingly, it is the spirit that we do the least with, but we did specify when we purchased it or tried to source it that it was made from corn because of the deep roots that corn has in the agricultural traditions of the Southwest. It's been important to every culture that's been here. So we wanted to make sure that it was made from corn and reflected that. But we actually won a gold medal for it in 2016 at the American Craft Spirits Association competition. I think that year it was in Chicago. And it was an honor to receive that award because we were up against maybe 400 more craft distilleries in the country.
Wow. And just to clarify, that was for your vodka?
Yeah, that was for our Claro vodka.
Nice.
Yeah. But then that base that we use, which is just neutral spirits, they call it, is the base for our gin, which we put through the stainless steel still that I gave you a little glimpse of there. We actually grind up 6 New Mexico botanicals that go into what's called the gin basket that hangs in the still. So as you heat the still and the vapors pass through the basket, the various herbs or botanicals infuse the flavors to really convert essentially what was vodka into gin. So we use, for instance, New Mexico, juniper, piñon, prickly pear, desert sage, rose, and lavender to really make it a New Mexico spirit. And some people have even said, because we give them a little whiff of the mixture during a tour, that it really reminds them of New Mexico, a hike in the desert or, a walk in the mountains after a rain. They get these various aromas that remind them of things that, we're known for here. So we tried to really distill New Mexico and put it into a bottle. So that's been very popular.
Lovely. And
then,
I like that you call your gin Ginebra, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All of our products have a Spanish, primary name and then an English subtitle, if you will. And that's really reflecting, my family's heritage here because we're a mixed Anglo-Hispanic family. I came from the East, but the other side of the family are local natives. And, we wanted, again, to honor, the traditions and the cultures that are here.
Yeah. And from my travels in Mexico, I know how to order a Ginebra, right?
There you go, right? Or
I
a
don't know much else,
Hintoneda,
but I know that.
right? Yeah, that's great. That's great. But we do make a couple other products from our base gin. We make a juniper liqueur, which is our finished gin that goes into a stainless steel barrel with a big tea bag made up with extra juniper and lavender that steeps in there for about a week. And then we sweeten it with cane sugar and make a liqueur out of it. And it's an interesting thing, and people have a little bit of a struggle sometimes wrapping their head around it. They really seem to love it when they sample it. It's a sweeter, more herbal experience of gin, if you will, because of the extra botanical exposure. But it actually is something that was part of the cocktail repertoire about a century ago. It just really, faded away at some point. But there is some cocktail recipes that are available that use it, but some people just prefer to sip it as a sweeter expression of gin with more of the herbs coming through. And then recently we just released a barrel-aged Navy strength gin. Again, it's our gin that's coming off the still at high proof. We haven't proofed it like the other products, meaning we haven't, lowered the proof. And it goes into a used whiskey barrel at the same standards as what we use to make whiskey. So it picks up the color and the flavor from the used whiskey barrel. And it really is a hybrid of the two. So for gin drinkers, it's kind of an introduction to whiskey. And for whiskey drinkers, it's an introduction to gin. You still get some of that herbal botanical flavor coming through, but you're also getting the color and the flavor contribution from the wood. And we really took two traditions in gin making and combined them there. One is barrel aging, because up until the late 1800s, early 1900s, almost all spirits were sold out of a cask. You'd go down to your local retailer, take your jug or get one from them and, fill it up and pay them whatever. Bottling only came about a little more than a century ago. So any clear spirit that we recognize today as clear probably would have had some color and or flavor imparted from the time it's spent in a cask. And so, distillers and brewers are experimenting, and even winemakers, of course, with different cask finishes for their base products. And, it really can take it in a whole other direction. The other thing we did was combined the barrel aging with the Navy strength gin category. That's something that's, again, not as well known nowadays, but supposedly the story goes we get the word proof from the fact that back in the day when the British Navy promised their sailors a daily portion of rum or gin, they had no way of looking at a barrel to determine if they had gotten a barrel of water or if they got a barrel of spirits that were truly what they were. So what they would do is they would take a small sample, just a tablespoon or so, mix it with gunpowder and ignite it. And if it lit, that was proof that it wasn't watered down spirit. So they would further water it down when they gave out the daily ration to the sailors, but there was very practical reasons for it other than avoiding unscrupulous merchants. And that was the fact that these casks or barrels were stored below decks on these wooden fighting ships. And there were very few, partitions below decks between the stores. So if the barrels tipped over in heavy seas and leaked and got the gunpowder barrels wet, they couldn't then effectively go into battle. So they had to make sure that it was truly up there in proof. And it was only in the early 1800s that scientific instrumentation came about that we can, better determine what the actual proof of whatever it is.
Not just flammable, but
right.
an actual proof. Yeah.
Right. Not fireworks.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
So,
and I was going to tell you, I was in Nashville at a distillery, and one of the things that they did was they barrel aged gin in wine barrels.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I bought 2 bottles of that. It was just lovely.
Right.
Right?
I mean,
yeah. A different flavor, and you can't really think I'm drinking gin right now, but you have to think I'm drinking this lovely barrel-aged white liquor, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's what I think, various alcohol producers have learned over time is that, there may be an established tradition on how you age your product, but by transferring, say, whiskey out of a bourbon barrel into a used sherry cask, or scotch into a used sherry cask, or in this case, gin, you can really impart some of those remnant flavors from within that used barrel into the other product, and really fuse a few different traditions together and create something that's unique and flavorful.
Yeah, and it's getting people to try that and just and forget what they know as,
Right,
that shelf liquor that they're used to buying. Forget that a
right,
little bit and try something new and just realize that, there's millions of ways to put this together, and what do
right,
you really like?
right, exactly. So yeah, we've enjoyed experimenting, and that's one of the nice things about the craft spirits industry and movement, is that we're not so tradition or hidebound in many ways as the major manufacturers are, with established products and reputations. We can experiment, and with small batches being pretty much everything we make, if it's really not a commercial success, or a flavorful experience, it's not a big deal to flush it down the drain or give it to people, whatever
Yeah,
you can do to get rid of
this is
it.
your Christmas gift.
Right, right. And, luckily we haven't had any bad experiences that we've had to do that with. So we've been pleasantly surprised along the way. But that's our clear spirit, if you will, lineup. But then we got into, during the pandemic, especially after establishing our brand with the vodka and the gin, we got into whiskey making, which is really my passion. And we really start with New Mexico grain as the basis of our product line. All of our whiskeys at this time are made with 91% blue corn that's sourced here in the state, and then 9% rather malted barley to help convert the starches to sugar. We use traditional methods of mashing and fermenting and distilling, but we really wanted to focus again on grains that were readily available here in New Mexico, rather than buying grain from outside the state. Because most bourbons, for instance, contain either rye or wheat or both. But here in New Mexico, rye and wheat really aren't grown for their seed or grain value. They're really grown for the grass value, for silage to feed livestock. So until we get an established industry that focuses on that here, if we ever do, then, we certainly would explore that. But ours is a simple 2-grain mash bill, it's called, or recipe. And that's the foundation for our moonshine, for our bourbon, and then for our single barrel corn whiskey, where we're able to reuse barrels, and using that same recipe and still extract the flavor and the color over, a couple of 3 or 4 different runs, if you will.
Nice. Well, and I prefer a corn mash anyway, so
Yeah.
keep that going. And especially, does the blue change the color? The blue corn?
It doesn't. Everything coming off the still should be clear.
Sure.
It's only after you barrel age it, and if you're not cheating by adding caramel color, all the color that you see really should be coming naturally from the oak exposure in the barrel. So the blue corn doesn't really add anything in the way of color, but it certainly imparts a very earthy, nutty flavor that
Nice.
is
Yeah.
distinct and unique. So
Very
using
nice.
that
You should
heirloom
try
corn.
one using hominy.
There you go.
There you go. A
Yeah.
little pasole flavored gin.
Right.
I'm not sure, but I think that's got something.
Yeah, potential.
Some potential there.
Yeah,
So it's about 20 minutes is up, and I want to make sure people know how to get a hold of your products, and how to get to your place for tastings.
sure, sure. Well, we do host people here for tours and tastings at the distillery. We're hoping to gear up and have some more events on site, which sadly died off with the pandemic. We were gearing up for that kind of thing. We have a lovely bosque location that is a hidden treasure, really, and it's our sanctuary, but the distillery is on our property, so we enjoy sharing it with people. We've been here for 25 or more years now. So the landscaping is mature, the buildings are situated, and there's just lots of, pleasant places to explore on the property. But we do have a tasting room, like I said, here. We also have the one you mentioned in Ruidoso in conjunction with the Perfect Gift. It's called, it's in Midtown on Southern Drive. But we do have a distributor out of Santa Fe who makes sure our products get into places like Total Wine and Whole Foods and some of the mom and pop stores in, the region, pretty much through the central spine of the state, from Angel Fire down to Las Cruces. I manage to truck the stuff with me when I go out to the rural areas for my clinical work, to get it to our tasting room in Ruidoso, and just try to give some folks that are further afield some exposure to what we're doing. And they're really excited about it because some of the more outlying areas really don't feel the love, whether it's healthcare or some of the better restaurant and drinking experiences that we have available.
Well, I'm really hoping to get more of the New Mexico spirits into the New Mexico restaurants. I mean, that would be a perfect way to get it out there. And so that's part of what we're doing here. But really, I want to make sure people are exposed to these distilleries and the things that you're doing, because they're so fun and experimental. And if you're going to give a gift of whiskey, give a gift of blue corn mash whiskey. I mean,
right? I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So, your website, give us that.
Yeah, it's actually algodonesdistillery.com, all one word. And we also have a Facebook page under that name as well, and an Instagram. And hopefully we'll be able to post more material on there over time, and as we get out of this pandemic and can welcome more people.
Well, good. Keep in touch and let us know how things are going. And really, it was a pleasure to talk to you today.
And thank you. And likewise, it's been great.
And thank you to our generous sponsors, U.S. Foods, Cisco, New Mexico, Shamrock Foods, Heartland Payment Systems, the Food Industry Self-Insurance Fund, and Benny Keith Foods for their annual sponsorship of NMRA and its programs. Visit nmrestaurants.org to learn more about our Chef Table sponsors and the association. Thanks for tuning in to New Mexico Restaurants Now. You can watch this and other episodes on the New Mexico Restaurants Now YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to the audio podcast at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music.